welcome to the Sprinklr Coffee Club. I'm Marshall Kirkpatrick, your host for the Sprinklr Coffee Club. And I've got a delicious cup of coffee right here in front of me. I haven't had a sip of it yet this afternoon. Oh, it's delicious. It's delicious. You don't have to drink coffee to join us here at the Sprinklr Coffee Club, but it couldn't hurt. It might help you get ready for a fast-paced and inspiring conversation about marketing, B2B, content marketing, paid, organic, all kinds of different things we're going to discuss today with one of my favorite people on the internet, Betsy Hindman. Betsy, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi, Marshall. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm so glad that we were able to be here together and get to talk about your work and thoughts with our community. Folks, if you are watching live, thank you. And I want to encourage you to jump in and ask questions, share thoughts in the comments field over on the right-hand side. If you are watching a recorded version of this, I invite you to join us live next time. Betsy, I am so glad to have you on the show here today.
Thank
you and I interact on a regular basis on social media, but I would love for you to start by introducing yourself a little bit and sharing with our audience what you do.
Sure, I'd be happy to, but first I have to join you for a cup of coffee, Marshall.
Cheers.
I can't believe you have me drinking coffee at this hour, but I'm very glad to be here. I have enjoyed all of your episodes in the past, and like you said, we are buddies on social media, and when you work as independently like I do, you need coworkers. So I sort of consider you to be a coworker. I enjoy our talks a lot. No one thinks about things more than you do, I think. But anyway, I am based in Nashville, and I have my own business in B2B marketing. And I've had it about a year and a half, and I kind of got interested in B2B. You know, I used to be in enterprise sales with Disney, and I was on the selling side, and then the whole inbound thing happened, and as that kind of as I kind of came out of a period where I was at home with kids, I started thinking more about marketing and how it supports sales, and ended up working in healthcare content marketing and in PR. And now, along the way, I've launched a couple of e-commerce companies, one of which is still good, one is dead. Now I'm doing my own business, which is strategy for B2B and paid amplification on social. And I love it. I've said working for yourself is the most challenge and the most fun you can have. And I love kind of owning that client relationship, which it is possible to do when you're the one employee. So that's me in a nutshell.
Fantastic. And can you tell us a little bit about what does that mean to say that you do strategy in B2B marketing today?
Well, I basically look at what the business challenge is and take sort of what I know about all the various ways you can communicate and solve business problems. And I try to for them in a way that is relevant and appropriate to their prospects. So that's what I mean by strategy. It's some people are just really focused on amplifying and using their PPC experts, and I know a lot of them, and I try to be one of them at times too. But I also like to think about what a company needs to do on their website and email, and what their sales team needs to know and be doing. And what they should think about in terms of journalists to interact with or events they should attend. So I think of all of those things in a kind of a surround sound way. And so that's what I mean by B2B strategy. But the lever that I pull most often tends to be the paid social.
Paid social and LinkedIn in particular.
That's right, because I'm in B2B, and I've been doing Facebook ads since 2008 in the B2C capacity. But most of the B2B interactions happen on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn has this really unmatched capability of enabling you to talk to people in the time that they're contextually interested in a business mindset. And it also enables you to target people through their paid program based on where they work or their job title or where they went to school or what advanced degrees they have and things like that. So in terms of B2B, it just can't be beat in terms of its capabilities for targeting. And
Sure.
LinkedIn's sort of on a hot roll right now with growth and participation. And I think they beat down a lot of their demons, which were people, only looking for jobs, and you would only see anniversaries and, kind of things you didn't really care about. And they're getting much better at the content on LinkedIn being relevant there. So I do spend most of my effort there. I still use Facebook and Instagram and Twitter ads too for B2B. Like on Instagram, it might be if a company's really focused on culture and showing off their culture so they can hire better, then we might have more of an Instagram advertising play. If they're really trying to reach academics and journalists and they're trying to participate in events that are going on or join a live conversation, we might use Twitter ads. And then Facebook, I typically, in B2B, I only use it around events, targeting people, geo-targeting people that are at events. And so that's kind of a minor player for me, a sporadic player at this point, but it's still, king in a lot of ways in terms of its tools and capabilities and reach.
That's a helpful, nuanced breakdown of your different strategies on the different platforms, even on a high level.
Thank you.
I wonder, all of these technologies and new technologies that are emerging, and then cultural changes happening, both independent of and in conjunction with all this technological change, means that there's a lot of change that has gone on in recent years. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit, based on prior stages in your career, what you feel like has changed the most. What things used to be like in B2B, say, even just 5-10 years ago?
Yeah.
What's changed and what's stayed the same?
Well, when I was in B2B earlier in my career, when I was with Disney, I was on the sales side. And Disney is a very marketing-driven company, and we still had a big sales team. And what we were selling was DVD to wholesale distributors, Kroger, Blockbuster franchise groups, things like that. And when I think back about B2B at that time, it was a lot of in-person meetings. You had long meetings where you used PowerPoint because that was cool then. And you had to wait a while for the words to spin around before you could actually read them in the PowerPoint, because we did a lot of fancy things that now we would not be doing. But so we had meetings in person. We had a lot of trade journals that were highly read then. A lot of those are gone now, industry trade journals, and big sales conventions, big trade shows. When we were getting really fancy, we would, wheel in one of those old library carts with the TV on top and the VCR on the bottom, and we would play a video for sales meetings with prospects and with groups. And so, we had tools. We had a marketing department. Of course, our marketing at Disney was very focused on the brand, and they were doing, TV, things like that, radio, but they would still provide sort of what we think of now as sales enablement tools. We had hot sheets, and then we had a much bigger focus on retail support and sell-through. So we had armies of merchandisers that would go, and I'm sure they still do now in grocery, but that was a lot of B2B then, was, hand-to-hand combat. And we would get our point of sale information through these merchandisers and their handheld devices. So now we have a lot more tools at our disposal. We have webinars and podcasts and ebooks and all kinds of things. Back then it was a lot more in person and phone calls and things now that I still find now at some point you still have to, get on the phone. And you find that people now are kind of hesitant to do that. And I have clients after a while, they're like, okay, we've really warmed up this client quite a bit. They've clicked on it, they've watched it, they've downloaded your white paper 3 times. I think it's time to, get on the phone with them. So anyway, that's kind of a little bit of a look back in time when I was on the sales side. And, of course, this, Marshall, but then the whole world went through the big inbound period where you had HubSpot and you had sort of the big invention of inbound. And I think now, and I am kind of excited to learn what I hear is kind of coming back, is that sales through social selling and the complexity of big sales and technology, the sales is almost cool again. The sales teams are starting to be built up again. Marketing is starting to realize that they do need to actually support sales and not just try to bring all the leads in through, gated content, et cetera. And our mutual friend, Hank Barnes, that works for Gartner, he shared with me an article that I think I sent you about how truly the sales team is more valued than ever in complex sales. And you see that, when decisions are made by committee and there's a lot at stake in a B2B decision, it's a big purchase, it's going to reflect on someone's career, and it takes a lot longer of a selling cycle, that one of the things that they need is confidence that they are doing the sales research process right. In order to make that big recommendation that a company leaps from their status quo to your solution, part of what they need is just confidence, and that sales really comes into play there, personal sales. So anyway, that's kind of interesting and exciting to me, because having a sales background, I like to think about ways now that social can help support people in sales.
I've seen Gartner, to your point, has said recently that the biggest barrier in enterprise sales today is buyer confidence, not so much even in the vendor, but confidence in themselves and their ability to use the product if they buy it, to capture the value that the vendor promises. And so if marketing can play a role illuminating the path in front of them to say, you can do it, that helps make a sale much easier.
That's right. And I think about there's a lot of analogies. People use military analogies, but I like the kind of the farm analogy about how marketing can come in and till the soil and fertilize the soil, and sales comes in with the seed and plants the seed and, tries to grow the relationship. And then marketing can come back as the rain later. And I think, I try to think of that with paid social in terms of kind of warming up prospects and giving people confidence in the brand and letting them see your case studies or your thought leadership articles or awards that you've won, things like that, by sending it in there first ahead of sales. And then also training the salespeople about how to use the social tools effectively to build their own expertise.
But to be clear, you're using paid here, not just at the vendor discovery stage of the buyer's journey, but also in the consideration stage.
That's right. And on LinkedIn, there's lots of different format types. And so you can have long form written content, you can have slideshows, you can have video. And so you can meet people where they are in their consideration stage or awareness or wherever they are. And also you can meet different personalities where they are based on what kinds of content they like to consume. So yeah, absolutely doing that with paid social. And also, it's part of a surround sound. You're also using email, and you're, making sure that your website is, the landing pages when they come in are right for that account. But anyway, yes.
Great.
Yeah.
And so if that's a good picture of the state of things today, what do you think things are going to look like in the future, Betsy? Where would you like to see things go in the future?
Well, I like this question, and I was thinking about it. I know you study a lot of futurism. I decided just to go with what I am interested in the future, which is, one of the things is I see B2B companies, of course, right now in the present, we're in sort of like a cookie and lead gen form period. And where I see that evolving is more toward in the way that B2C businesses have moved to giving consumers really what they want in terms of using more ungated content and using more user-generated types of information, user-generated reviews, sort of capturing things in the wild for consumers to be brought along with, as opposed to what we see a lot of now, white papers, which hardly anyone wants to download, or case studies, which I think people are cynical of case studies a little bit, and they sort of smell the home cooking. You know, they know that all the numbers in there come from your company, and I think there's some SaaS companies out there doing a really good job of sort of capturing user reviews, or say they're at a conference and they have a videographer there and they get their clients to come in and do video testimonials and they push those out. Just kind of, I see the case study of the future sort of really being fresher and changed. Maybe it's motion graphics with a GIF, you know. But it's, I think the millennials are a lot more skeptical of case studies. And the same with when I think about B2B influencers. I think, you know, you have influencers now with the big companies like the Oracle and Dell and SAP and companies like that. But it's going to be like the year 3000 before most B2B companies have paid influencers. But what I do see them being able to do is to just find people who have a good story to tell. They no longer have to have a good story to tell and have a big following and have a formal, you know, paid relationship with it. Because now with paid amplification, if they just have a good story to tell, you can use social media tools to amplify that yourself. You know what I mean?
So, I do. That's exactly what Forrester says in as an emerging best practice in influencer relations. They say so many brands are disappointed in the reach that they're getting when they rely on influencers for reach. But where influencers can really shine is by creating unusually authentic, high quality content that the brand can then put paid budget behind to drive the reach.
Right. And that is something that B2B is hardly doing, you know, and is not hard to do. And all the platforms are sort of developing tools to make that easier and easier. So that's a cool thing that I see coming in the future. I think events are going to be big. I think people, you see that already, that, you know, millennials love events. They love to get together. I think actually people of all generations like events. And with this sort of dispersed workforce that we have now, with both big companies having people work from home and then also the whole contract economy, that I think people like to get together, and they benefit from sort of the relationships and the empathy that happen in person at events. And then the vendor or the sponsor benefits from their attention, because people can pay more attention and be more focused when they're at events. So I sort of see, you know, LinkedIn's focus on their new event tool. I think one of the things that Facebook is still great for is their events. I think that's going to be something you're going to see, you know, much more of in the future. Another thing I've been thinking about, Marshall, is the way people stay on the platforms now. I think, you know, they just don't click off and go over to the websites anymore. So I think we're going to see more and more people just getting it done while the person stays on the platform where they are. Whether it's Google and the featured snippet, they're just going to read it there, not click over. Or on LinkedIn, you're going to need people to be able to get what they need to get right there on the platform, because the tendency is to just sit there and scroll. I actually heard a stat yesterday that people scroll through 300 feet of content on social every day. Think about that. That's a lot. So people are staying on the platform. So that's an interesting thing to think about in strategy. And then another thing that is cool is coming is, and maybe some people don't think it's cool, but is automation for ads, so that places like LinkedIn and other social media platforms, they actually tell you when an account is ready for you to get on the phone. They say, this account has clicked this many times on this, they've interacted with your content organic, they're checking out your CEO's profile, and I'm going to give them a readiness score for you. So this, this account is actually ready for a next level contact. So I think that's kind of exciting, interesting stuff.
Agreed.
And then the sort of the last thing I think that I personally see coming in the near future is things that don't scale. It's focusing on sort of small but elegant efforts that make a big difference, whether it's something like custom video that goes in email. It's not very scalable, or really niche content that speaks to the industry, to the pain point in the industry, using industry vocabulary on the calendar cycle that's appropriate for that industry. So these things, some companies, they have more than one industry they serve. Right now, they're just trying to serve it all out in a big buffet and say, eat what you want. But I think, maybe that buffet analogy doesn't work. But I think what's coming is a more, what is that fashion term I'm looking for? It's a more...
verticalized.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking about fashion. Anyway, bespoke.
Bespoke?
Yes, that's it. It's a more bespoke approach to creating interactions with customers. And I think people are going to have to go there because everyone else is going to scale. You know what I mean? They're obsessed with scale over here. So if we zag, then maybe we do things that don't scale. So anyway, that's something else that I've been thinking about.
That's great. So that raises another question that I know I'm interested in, and I bet some of our viewers will be interested in it as well. If you are viewing live, please feel free to jump into comments and ask your own questions, share your thoughts, and we will fold them into the last part of our conversation here. Betsy, scale naturally raises the question of measurement and benchmarking. And I'm wondering how you think about measurement and benchmarking today, and what's on your mind with regard to quantification of success?
Well, I don't know if I might get myself in trouble with this, but I have a really serious question around this, because I use LinkedIn a lot, but then I see a big debate happening about measuring brand behavior versus performance marketing. So you see all these agencies merging now that are brand agencies merging with performance agencies. There's just a big article in the Drum this week about how companies, B2B companies and others, should be spending more on brand versus performance. And I don't know if you follow the, it's the LinkedIn, it's like Peter Weinberg and John Lombardo, and they have that contrary marketer. But so it's LinkedIn employees, and they're talking about how clicks do not matter. Clicks are actually detrimental. It's basically, they say clicks are for idiots, kind of thing. And they say the CTO is not clicking on your content. And they're more focused on reach and frequency and share of voice and things that LinkedIn do not measure. So I'm presently in a state of somewhat confusion about that, because I wonder if they realize that they have this huge army of people pushing clicks on LinkedIn for high prices, showing that the CTO in fact did click, but then they're talking about how clicks are for suckers over here on the other side. So, benchmarking, typically what I like to benchmark is, I'm going to take your content that you're, very niche focused content that solves a pain point for your clients, and put it directly in front of the people that matter most to your business. I'm going to put it in front of that buying committee at the right stages. I'm going to use different content. I'm going to move them through the funnel, moving them over to other platforms as needed. Use Google Tag Manager to sort of collect them over here and then retarget them over here where it's cheaper. That whole thing is really what I measure. People that I'm driving to your website, that are downloading your white paper, that are a lead. I'm now hearing from others that really B2B needs to go back to brand. And I'm following that whole issue very closely. I find it fascinating, and I like that things are staying interesting in my world.
Is that true for large and small companies, or large and medium-sized companies, or just for very large companies?
Yeah, that's a good point. I have not really seen them break that down. I know that most of the time, small companies are obsessed with getting the leads, and their point is that it erodes the brand when you're constantly basically doing sales activation. And you probably saw that big study that just came out from Les Binet. I might be butchering his name, but I'll send it to you. You can put it in the show notes. But anyway, the B2B side of that is what the LinkedIn people are talking about. So I'm following that. But yeah, measurement is always on everyone's mind, showing attribution. And even when you get the lead, following it all the way through to closing the sale to revenue is a whole nother ball of wax, and everyone struggles with that. Everyone struggles with how to actually do that. When in fact, I think it's just really hard to do. I mean, a lot of times these things happen in person. And do you know what influenced them? Do you know why they think highly of your company, or why they're so informed, where it came from? You can't always really pin it down, especially in a long selling cycle with B2B. You can get pretty close if it's putting lipstick in a basket online, but not so much in B2B. So attribution is a constant conversation.
That makes sense. Speaking of platforms that attribution is a challenge for, but everyone's excited about, I believe, Betsy, you have been paying some attention to TikTok lately.
Oh, yes. Well, that's just for fun.
Can you tell us what you've seen there?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Are you on TikTok, Marshall?
I have been on TikTok.
So my 20-year-old son said to me the other day, he said, "Mom, I never thought I was going to have to say this to you, but get off TikTok." But anyway, it's so joyous. At least what I see is exuberant, joyous creativity. I see, high school kids with their parents dancing, all kind of cool things happening there. And because it's such a early stage in that platform, it sort of makes you think, okay, I'm seeing the beginning of something. And in the early stage, how can that be used to the good of the world? Beyond brands. I mean, brands can do cool things on TikTok. There's the hashtag challenges and things like that I've read about that are very cool, and I think are showing pretty good ROI. Although I don't think they have self-serve ads for TikTok yet. I could be wrong. In B2B, we don't do a lot of TikTok ads. But I think it's a very, I guess it's optimistic. I find it to be optimistic. And I enjoy seeing what's happening there and following it. And as I mentioned to you, I think there's some sort of social good that can happen with it that it could only probably happen now because it's still beginning and growing organically a lot. So, but anybody that's not on there, I recommend you download it. I kind of set aside the whole worry that the Chinese are spying on us through the TikTok app. I hope that's not true. But if they are spying on me, they're getting a lot of boring information. Anyway, I encourage you to spend more time there because I think, you're very interested in climate change. And I think there's probably something really cool, if it's not already happening, that could happen there on topics like that.
Yeah, let's conclude with this, Betsy. Let me ask you about social impact. I know that that's something that you are really, there's a new focus in your work that's sort of unfolding around social impact. And that's something that's so important to so many people out there that are watching the show today. I just listened to a fantastic Forrester podcast about values-driven consumers.
Really?
Just today, about how incredibly important that is to now 52% of consumers. It just reached a crossed over a threshold where Forrester says that 52% of consumers say that the values impact of a brand has a significant impact on their purchase-making decision.
Wow, that's really cool. That's inspiring. I love the young people. I love the Generation Z and the millennials. They're going to save us all. So I'm just getting started on a new issue I'm interested in, and I struggle with that thing whenever you think, oh, I'm going to get interested in this new topic, and you have this immediate fear that sets in of like, I'm a Johnny-come-lately. Like, there's tons of people who know more about this issue. They've been on this issue forever, and what are they going to think? But I think I mentioned to you that I read that book, American Prison by Shane Bauer, a while back, where he goes undercover in a Louisiana prison. And then I read The Sun Also, not The Sun Also Rises, but oh God, it was Oprah's book club. It was this, anyway, it was a book about book clubs in prison. And so I sort of started thinking about the prison reform issue, and I became inspired by Brian Stevenson, which I hope doesn't make me a cliche, but I think a lot of people are very inspired by Brian Stevenson. In fact, there's a movie coming out based on his book, Just Mercy, of December. So in a nutshell, I've been meeting with people in this space and looking at these incredibly cool little organizations all over the country that are they're run by people who are impacted by this issue. So they've been in prison themselves. Last weekend, I met with a woman that runs an organization called Operational Restoration, and the Newcomb Prison Project in New Orleans. And they bring higher ed into women's prisons in Louisiana. And they had some unbelievable stories about, I don't know if we have time to go into, they're really good stories, but they're about the thirst that people in prison have for knowledge and for higher level critical thinking. And so they're bringing in full 2-lane courses. I saw the syllabus. It's a lot of work, and these women are diving in head first and doing all the work. They even had a story about how they had the pages of the campus pack were run off on a printer, and the print was just tiny. And the women had bought magnifying glasses and read over 100 pages of content in tiny little print. And things like that, they have stories about that were just really inspiring. And there's so many issues around prison reform when you start diving into it. The bail issue is terrible. The stigma that children face when their parents are in prison is terrible. The idea of prosecuting someone who's a 13 to 17-year-old as an adult, I can tell you that 17-year-olds are not adults. So there's the conditions that they face when they're in prison with overcrowding and food and being charged for basic necessities So I'm just getting started, and I'm digging in to see where I might fit in. Where could my digital media skills fit in? Does it matter that I'm in Nashville and we have a big private prison headquarters here? How can all these things come together? So I'm just digging around, talking to people, and looking for ideas. And the only thing I've done so far is buy a URL. I bought a Prisoners Book Club URL, Marshall, because I think they need a book club. And these organizations that work all over the country, there's one called Fathers and Children Together in California, and I'm sort of seeking them all out. What you find is these are people who they've been in prison, they've been impacted by it, and it seems like it sort of seems like the same situation where you have mothers of small children and they have to run the preschool at church. They're really the ones that should be sitting in the service, being nourished by the sermon and the choir, but they're the ones that have to run the preschool. It's the same situation. Like, you have people that are getting out of prison and they're running all these little nonprofits. It's sort of like we should take their best practices and have them implemented as policy in our prisons so that these people don't have to do all this heavy lifting. Driving hours and hours, taking people to visit when they get transferred. So anyway, I appreciate you asking about that, and I'm glad that we talked about it because it sort of holds my feet to the fire to do something.
Let me ask you, perhaps you can just summarize to conclude the show. Why are you doing that work with your work skills, Betsy?
I don't know. I guess I just feel like it's a completely new area to me, and it's it's well. Here's one point of view. I've had this thought. Maybe we all have that. If I was alive during the civil rights movement, I would have done X, Y, Z. If I had been alive during slavery, I never would have participated in that. And you have this kind of march through time with these racial issues, and this is the issue now. And my kids are gone to college, and I spent the past few years building up my career, my business, and I feel good about that, and I feel in a good place with that. So I have some time on my hands now, and I'm like, well, what's the big racial issue today? Well, it seems to me that it's prison reform and justice. And so I really hope that I can find a good way to plug in. And you said you might introduce me to some people at Justice Collaborative, so I want to do that. And I'm, excited to do that.
That's wonderful. Good. Well, I'm so glad we got to discuss that. I know that there are folks out there that'll be able to relate and will feel inspired by the steps that you're taking along those lines.
Yeah.
I want to wrap up on that note. Betsy, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone who's watching live and recorded, thank you for your time. I hope that you have found this inspiring and informative and entertaining. I feel smarter as a result of this conversation, which is a pleasure.
I always enjoy talking to you.
Likewise, Betsy.
Okay.
Thank you so much,
Bye.
everyone. We'll see you next time on the Sprinklr Coffee Club.
Okay.